I'm Robert Emmett Hernan. I'm head of BlueStack Productions, Inc., the publisher of Irish Environment, an online magazine covered environmental matters on the island of Ireland. I'm here today in Belfast at the offices of Friends of the Earth, Northern Ireland, with James Orr. James, you're very welcome.
Thank you.
James, why don't you tell the audience what the Friends of the Earth is and what it does in a general way?
Yeah, Friends of the Earth has been going since the 1970s. I tend to think of it not as a normal corporate institution. It's more a social movement, I think, than an organisation. It has three different components. One is at a supranational level, Friends of the Earth International, which combines effort on, I think now something like 76 different countries across the world, who unite together and share a common agenda. It's also got national organisations, and we would view ourselves in that position as well. We have Friends of the Earth Northern Ireland, part of England, Wales and Northern Ireland. But we've also got a grassroots base. We've got local groups, local activists. So combining that grassroots pressure with national offices, with an international agenda, I think makes Friends of the Earth quite a special organisation.
What's the size of the group in Northern Ireland, memberships?
Membership would be a couple of thousand,
Okay.
you know, very, very small numbers relative to some of the bigger organisations, like the National Trust. But we have a very focused agenda here. We tend not to do standard biodiversity type campaigning. We tend to focus more on, you know, issues to do with the economy, with energy, and more recently with the planning system.
Yeah, I thought today, James, that there's so many things that the Friends of the Earth has been involved with and is involved with, but I thought maybe we could specialize on the things that are engaging you now, and planning certainly is one of them. But also maybe we could start with the transport issue. And I know Friends of the Earth has been very active in the fight over the expansion of A5, going from Derry down to the south. What's the status of that issue?
Yeah, the status is that it is yet another decision in Northern Ireland that is being mediated through the courts. The High Court ruled about 6 weeks ago that the decision taken by the government to push the A5 through two SACs, Lough Finn and Lough Foyle, sorry, the River Finn and Lough Foyle, that decision was contrary to the Habitats Directive, and because the Habitat Regulation Assessment was not carried out. In other words, the High Court deemed the process to be unlawful. So as with many cases, we see something that we're defining as systemic failure in environmental governance, where particularly the pivotal European Union directives, such as EIA directive and the Habitat directives, aren't being implemented correctly. And if they are implemented and transposed into domestic law, there's a very cavalier attitude to how these important pieces of European legislation are being addressed.
The A5 version that was struck down by the court, was that the full version with the Irish government involved, or was this the pared down version where they were just going to expand the road somewhat?
Yeah, the big scheme, you know, the £1 billion scheme, obviously had to be truncated to focus solely in those elements relating to Northern Ireland. That was pared down again. So it was the pared down version that eventually was thrown out by the courts. But the government hasn't learned this lesson. You know, it may well transfer some of the money to other road schemes, and we see similar problems with EIA and Habitats Directives with these road schemes as well. So, you know, I always say to people, I didn't join Friends of the Earth to spend a lot of time in court, but you know, hardly a month goes by that we're not out of the courts at the minute, and that reflects, you know, a pathology in terms of the implementation of the law. We are tired of hearing in Friends of the Earth that, you know, the rule of law is sacrosanct and so important, and it's a political mantra. But the rule of environmental law is either non-existent or incredibly weak.
It's interesting. We've seen the history in the Republic of Ireland with a huge series of cases brought to European Court, and consistently Ireland being found to be in violation of the EU directives over a long period of time. You know, there's now some change in that. Is this one of the first times when in the A5 court decision Northern Ireland was held to the task on a European directive?
Not the first time. It certainly won't be the last time. I'm thinking of another case recently to do with the Oma gold mine, which was a gold mine that morphed into something else. You know, they were exporting rock illegally. 1 million tons of rock was established by the Ombudsman's report. They were taking out a lot of lead, and most people say they don't have consent for that. And residents, again, it's local residents, you know, who are looking at this with, you know, where's the government here?
Mhm.
Where's the state when we need the state to protect our rights from not just nuisance but serious environmental injustices?
Mhm.
And the state is often on the side of the developer,
Mhm.
in this case the Oma Minerals Limited. And a couple of local residents took a very successful case on the particular implementation of European EIA directive, and that was to do with cumulative impact. For years we've been ignoring the cumulative impact of development, and actually the Department of Environment pulled out just before it went to court and awarded costs. The judge awarded costs to the local residents, and that was a fantastic success again.
Now let's focus, if we could, on the two big issues, I think, probably for you and for many people, is the recent assaults on the planning process and fracking. And perhaps we could start with the planning process, and if you could just kind of briefly give an audience a sense of what's happening in the planning, recent planning bill that was debated last month in December. Last week, sorry.
We're used in Friends of the Earth. Not blessed are those who expect little, for they are seldom disappointed, I guess is what I'm trying to say. We are used to our agenda not being reflected in government policy. We campaign for better laws, we campaign for better policies. But what happened in the last 10 days was nefarious in the extreme. Because we've been fighting clauses 2 and 6, which in our interpretation of the Royal Town Planning Institute, Northern Ireland Local Government Association, senior academics from the universities, would give economic supremacy in all planning applications, development plans, planning policies.
This is Section 2 and 6 of the planning bill.
Section 2 and 6.
Okay.
And then out of the blue, when these were being voted through, DUP and Sinn Féin, in cahoots, together, made no attempt to disguise their collusion on this, introduced 2 new clauses. Now, as seasoned campaigners, not used to getting our own way, we were shocked by the degree of collusion, but more than that, the attempt to fundamentally take away natural laws, people's right to challenge the state on its lawfulness of behaviour.
So those 2 last-minute amendments were to create these economic zones under the control of Deputy First Minister and Deputy First Minister. The other last-minute amendment was to restrict the grounds for appeal, to limit it now just to human rights issues or violation of the EU law. Those 2 amendments were at the last minute. The planning bill itself was submitted to the public for consultation. Is that correct?
Planning bill went to consultation in 2011.
But these last-minute amendments had no public consultation, is that right?
Clauses 2 and 6, which are the fundamental change to the 2011 legislation, never went to public consultation. However, the Environment Committee was given the role to scrutinise it. It invited evidence. 93% of the respondents were opposed to clauses 2 and 6. And then at the very last minute, out with any deliberations, even at the Environment Committee, these draconian amendments were introduced. And the third-party rights of appeal was rejected, which would have been the counterbalance. But the issue with judicial review is not just limiting the scope to European law and to European Convention on Human Rights, but also limiting the time limit from 3 months to 6 weeks. And having worked with a number of groups now, like the Riverfront Anglers Association and Cavanagh Gold Mine and the A5 Alliance, you only really get your affidavits in and your case in on the very last day. And 3 months is absolutely no time at all. For this to be reduced again to 6 weeks is effectively saying you don't have any rights. But something happened in the last 10 days, and many other political parties are now questioning, I think, their role in government. And many environmentalists have been radicalised by the process, because time and time again we're saying things can't possibly get worse. Clauses 2 and 6, oh my goodness, it couldn't get any worse than this. And suddenly it seems like nirvana to have clauses 2 and 6, because what the new amendments will mean is that the whole of Northern Ireland could be declared an economically significant planning zone. Fermanagh could be declared economically significant planning zone for fracking, for example, and the consenting authority for that is Peter and Martin, First and Deputy First Minister, and these consents can be awarded, and the legislation is very clear, unconditionally.
Uh-huh.
So when they say Northern Ireland is open for business, what we would say to them, yeah, it's open for business, do your business here. And I mean in a scatological sense, not just in the political sense.
How are you working with the fracking groups on that issue?
Yeah, Friends of the Earth, I think, internationally now is really concerned about unconventional oil and gas, you know, and
Uh-huh.
to put this in context, we see the opening up of the Arctic, the deep water drilling, fracking. With runaway climate change, you know, it's the worst thing we could be doing, certainly in Northern Ireland. But I think the resistance to fracking won't be by conventional campaigning. It'll be by community groups operating locally and resisting locally, because that's where the energy is, and that's where
that's where the impact is.
The impact is, and a real sense of your sense of place, your community, your identity, the meaning you have in the area that you live, being stripped away by, you know, a landscape such as Fermanagh, which is so beautiful and will become industrialised. What people don't realise with fracking is it only takes a couple of years for the landscape to be destroyed irreparably, because of a quick industry, lots of small frack pads everywhere, as opposed to one mega infrastructure project. So it's alarming in the sense that it can be expedited through the system, and certainly we see the spectre of the planning bill taking away your right to protest and resist through the courts, and also taking the consenting authority from the DOE.
Was there debate on the planning bill that's part of what's behind these changes in the planning bill, to control the fracking decision in favor of the developers?
To say that the reason why they did it is because of fracking is probably using too much conjecture.
Right.
I think it's probably part of a suite of issues. Very conveniently, they hide behind sectarian politics. When I say they, I think actually it's a few mandarins at the top of both main political parties who are pushing through a particular agenda. Part of it is insecurity as well, and we saw that during the G8. In order to be recognised in the international stage after 30-40 years of horrible conflict, maybe it's the only game in town for them, that they have to sell an identity that they're uncomfortable with internationally to what is global economic policy. So we see in Northern Ireland a manifestation of this neoliberal agenda, complete deregulation. You know, we see it in the planning bill. It's interesting that no matter how draconian the government wants to become in stripping away people's rights, and we see that through the planning bill, lots and lots of seeds of opportunity are bubbling up. The fracking communities in Fermanagh and Tyrone and North Antrim are getting mobilised now. Glenavy incinerator is one I mentioned earlier. 6,000 people objected to it. Coalition of residents in Lochside Park in North Belfast opposed an unusual alliance between Walmart and Belfast City Council to turn a shared space, a public park, into yet another supermarket. But instead of saying what are we against, you know, I think the challenge for us in the future is actually, well, what are we for? But the energy that's been unleashed recently, about the Giant's Causeway decision, the decision to push a road through the middle of a crannog to facilitate the G8 leaders in Fermanagh, these decisions create ripples of dissent, and I think it's our role to turn that dissent into something creative, to say that there are alternatives.
Now, the interesting thing about the fracking campaign recently too was the recent protests for both in Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland involved the farming community, and that seems to be a new development, that the farming community is beginning to sense the competition for water resources is a real threat to them. Have you been working? Have you had any experience with the farming community on this issue?
Yeah, during the G8 protests, we organised an anti-fracking event in Belfast, which was very successful. We also went down to Fermanagh as well, and what was really nice were the amount of families, you know, clapping protesters and stuff. Very hard to protest in Northern Ireland, you know, because there's a legacy of flags and emblems, you know, that thankfully a lot of people are moving away from now in terms of protest. But what was remarkable about those people was the breadth and the diversity of them. For example, Ballin and Mallard Gun Club. There's a couple of guys wearing t-shirts marching there. There were lots of women, you know, with young children who are concerned about the health implications, particularly in pregnant women and kids. And there was also farmers there as well. What we find time and time again here is that the lobby groups for particular industries, and I'm thinking here particularly of the Ulster Farmers Union, which is very powerful in Northern Ireland, probably similar to the Irish Farmers Association in the Republic. But there's often a case where the lobby groups actually conspire to defeat their own industry in the long term. One of the things agriculture needs to deal with is the shift away from fossil fuels in perpetuity. But UFU and others have locked them into this particular model. Only the big farms get bigger. Forget about the small farmers and rely on inputs like soy and petrochemicals from different parts of the world. That's not sustainable in the long term. But we find that they lock themselves into a particular analysis, which is ultimately self-destructive. But talking to farmers, you get a completely different picture. So it's almost that the farmers' lobby say one thing, but the farmers on the ground, and of course they're concerned about their business, and of course they're concerned about animal health and livestock health, and they're concerned about their family because they have to live there.
Let me ask you another slightly different take on this whole fracking issue. Is that there's been some reports in the papers that the Conservative government in the UK has been putting pressure on the First Minister and Deputy First Minister on these planning issues to make these changes. And have you picked that up, that that's part of that the UK government is interested in fracking taking place here?
It certainly would be part of our analysis, absolutely, and we saw it, and we should have read more into it in the G8 communique that came out on the Friday before the G8 meeting. David Cameron, Theresa Villiers, the Secretary of State, signed a document with Peter Robinson and Martin McGuinness also as co-signatures to say that judicial reviews and creating simplified planning zones would be part and parcel of the new dispensation. None of us thought it was going to happen. None of us thought it would happen within a week. So Cameron's name is all over that policy. Cameron sees the liberalisation of Northern Irish planning law as a very helpful contribution to his attacks on the planning system in England. What sustains me in my work, what gets me out of bed in the morning, is the energy I see from local communities. That people are now seeing through the mask. They're seeing through the fact that the Emperor is wearing clothes. They can see through a lot of the policies. They're seeing through the connivance between the DUP and Sinn Féin to stitch up the environment for corporate interests. And the amount of energy that's coming from the bottom up in Northern Ireland is incredible. And people are beginning to challenge things that they've never challenged before. And it's the power of community. And whilst they try and sectarianise every debate, like the A5 road or an incinerator issue, or on the planning bill, they try and make it out to be one side against another. People are beginning to see through this. And I think that's where the positive energy will be in the future. There will be community resistance, and certainly from our point of view, we hope that's creative resistance about developing a new future.
That's a good point, Dan. James, thanks for talking with us.
Thank you.